Emerson with CertaPro Painters and BOMA Austin's Program Committee Co-Chair. Very glad to have everyone back this week for continuation of the two-part series hosted by IREM and BOMA Austin. Before we get started, here's a few housekeeping items. All attendees are on mute. That's intentional. During the presentation, we encourage you to participate in the following way. If you have a question during the webinar, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Be sure that all panelists and attendees is selected in the drop-down menu and then type in your question. We will be monitoring questions submitted throughout the presentation, and Kim will answer them as they are asked or at the end of the presentation. For those that wish to receive TREC continuing education, please stay on through the entire program and fill out the form at the end. Let's begin. I'd like to welcome back Kim Morgan, CPM Director of Property Management with Stream Realty Partners. She is a past president of IREM Austin and served on many BOMA Austin committees. Kim moved to Atlanta, Georgia last year. Boo. And we are excited to have her back with us in Austin, if at least virtually. With that, Kim, I'll just hand it over to you. Please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and get rid of that. All right. I hope everyone's doing well today. I know I am. It's been kind of crazy around here in Atlanta and ridiculously hot, although I think Austin probably is a little warmer. I think we got up to 98 degrees yesterday, and my poor little dog was suffering. I had to put sunblock on his head because he's a white dog. Anywho, so we are going to get this thing started. This is the second part of how to budget in COVID world. And what we're going to be focusing on today is not what we did last week, which was more of what we're dealing with in current times in 2020, but really focusing on what to look forward to for 2021. So we're going to talk about a couple different things. We'll talk about taxes, we'll talk about janitorial, HVAC, and some other items that I think we're all kind of questioning what's going to happen in 2021. So let's go ahead and get started on that. All right, so like Tom said, if you need continuing education, you need to make sure that you stay on the presentation, and Amy will help you with that. And we're going to do something a little bit different today than we did last week. I'm going to have Amy to actually unmute everyone, but I need for you to mute yourselves immediately after that, so we don't hear any background noise. And going forward, if you have a question, if you could raise your hand, and then I can call on you. I think I should be able to see you, and I can call on you, or you can just say, go ahead and talk. And then you can ask your question, or you may actually be giving feedback to one of the comments that I have. So I want this to be as interactive as possible because there's so much information that I think is really important for all of us to learn. I'm not going to say that I'm the expert in all things 2021 COVID. So I want to make sure that if you have other information that's just as valuable, I want you to be able to share that, okay? So when Amy takes you off mute, keep your audio on mute if you're not speaking, because I will hear your dogs, I will hear your kids, I will hear your phones, and I don't want to hear any of it. You may hear my dog, but that's it, okay? Raise your hand. That's where that is there to say that you want to speak, and then you'll be able to talk. Keep your video on. I don't think I'll still be able to see you, but I would still like to if it's possible. And then if you have a question and don't actually want to just voice that, you can also put it in the chat, and I actually will read those questions as we're going, and we can have dialogue through that, which is what we did last week. All right, so we are going to get started. So one of the main questions is, will the pandemic change how properties are valued? And the answer is most definitely. With the fact that we are, retail specifically, is having such a high rate of AR, we are definitely going to see some issues there. Also in office, we're going to see some, because people are starting to realize that they don't need as much space as they thought they needed, right? So if they're in 10,000 square feet and now they're working in all remotely, they're going to figure out that maybe they only need 5,000 square feet. So I think what we're going to see, and I think this was something David Watson had brought up on last week's call, was that our sublease market is going to increase tremendously. because of that. People are just going to be leaving. We're seeing that definitely in Atlanta, and I would imagine we're going to see that in Austin if we haven't already in certain areas. I know industrial is one of those areas where people are just starting to move out and say, you know what, we just don't need that amount of space. So they're subleasing a portion of their space. You'll see the same thing in office. You probably won't see it in retail. I think really companies are just going to shut down is what's going to happen, because once the stimulus money runs out and we're still not fully operational, there just isn't much more that they can do to sustain themselves, right? So that's something to think about. All right, so let's move on. So let's talk about taxes. Fun times. So significant effect on 2021 values, right? So there's a new legislation that's quoting a 3.5 cap on tax values, right? Well, because of the pandemic and the fact that we're not getting as many tax dollars because people are going out of business and there's just less revenue, they're asking to possibly go back to an 8% cap just to be able to collect those fees. So it's something that we need to think about as we're going into building maybe multi-use buildings, is maybe taking out the retail and sticking more just to office. Or focusing not on office buildings, but purchasing more industrial buildings because they're a little bit more stable right now. So those are things, again, you're going to need to look at. So values are probably going to decrease because of that. The need and the desire to have more office space is slowly but surely starting to decrease. All right. CBD, they're projecting only 75% occupancy for next year, at least in the first quarter. And then we're just going to have to play it by ear, unfortunately, because we just don't know. I know that there are a lot of tech companies that are saying that they're not coming back until January or maybe the second quarter of next year. There are any company that is very high dense, they're saying the same thing, because one, they don't want to pay to have all of the partitions put up, all the plexiglass, and they just don't want to put their people at risk. So they're having them just work remotely, and then they're alternating. One of the things that we were doing in Georgia is we had an A group and a B group. So we had A group go for 2 weeks because that's when you can see if you're getting symptoms. And then we would rotate to the B group. And that was kind of how we got through. And that's how we're getting through now, because obviously in our Houston and Dallas office specifically, I mean, you know, the cases are getting worse, they're increasing. And so we're just trying to keep everybody safe. So it's just things to look out for. Let's see, there's an East Austin development that I was told about where there are no leases signed right now. They thought that they were going to project like this huge opportunity, and now it's completely like empty at this point. And so they're trying to figure out what they're going to do next. And then office buildings, 60% of tenants are actually backing out of deals, and that is not good. So there's a couple of buildings that are office buildings that are being built right now, and they have to typically have that 50% occupancy, 50% leased up before the building even, takes off. That's not happening. People are starting to back out because they're realizing, again, that they just don't need the same amount of space that they did before. And then as tenants are coming up for renewal, they're not renewing, they're terminating. And then they're just either going to a smaller, less expensive space, or just coming up with some other ideas, or subleasing, which is really going to be the key. So we need to think about that. All right, let's move on. Anybody have any questions regarding taxes or want to share any more information that they have? All right, we will move on. So parking, let's see what we have here. You know I love videos. Oops, sorry. That is parking gone way wrong, okay? I just thought it was a funny video, so I wanted to share. So let's move on to parking. Oops, Bad news. Oh, look at the cute little baby face. So here's the bad news. Valet is suffering. Big surprise there. They're suffering. Why? Because we have less retail. We have less people that are wanting people in their vehicles. And so valet is definitely going down. So if that's one of your revenue streams, that's something you need to look at for next year. Okay. Transient numbers are down 80 to 85% of budget right now. Again, not surprising, being that people aren't going, downtown, they're not going to their office buildings because they're working remotely. So it's transient numbers are going to be down, and we have to start thinking about what that's going to look like for next year. So I definitely encourage you to, talk to your parking service providers and ask them what their thoughts are on this. And this information is actually coming from a local parking vendor in Austin. So I just want to make sure that you know that the information I'm giving you is all for local vendors and services, okay? Let's see, tech companies aren't coming back until January or later. We talked about that already. Laz laid off 8,000 employees nationwide, which is a huge problem. And I know that even on the property management side, there were many, many layoffs. We had, I think there was some, like the big five, at least 3 of them laid off almost 20 to 25% of their property management staff because they didn't have any more property to manage because we went remote. So it's really unfortunate. I will say though, I can speak for Stream, my company. We have not laid off one person. And that is something that we value very strongly, is to make sure that we are keeping people on, because at some point we are going to go back to maybe a new normal, but it will be a normal where we'll have a larger occupancy. And so we're making sure that we don't let anyone go, because we don't want to have to hire new people when we have great people now. So we are for next quarter, budget about 65% of your capacity, because we just don't know what's going to happen. That's really important, and you probably want to just start, growing slowly. So this particular service provider said he's probably going to budget around 90% by second quarter, but I think you're really going to have to play that by ear and see how like the end of this year does. So I would definitely be as conservative as possible to make sure that you are, make sure that you're not just jumping the gun and saying, oh yeah, we're going to definitely match what we did, the year before, because we don't know what this new normal is going to look like. They could truly decide that everyone's just going to work remotely or split it, down the middle. And that's something we don't want. Okay. The good news, look at the little girl. She's so cute. That's what my grandbabies are going to look like. Anywho, mass transit traveling is actually going down. And the reason for that is people don't want to be enclosed in small areas with COVID. Big surprise there. So more people are actually purchasing cars. So if you know someone that's purchasing cars, that sells cars, you might want to get in on that, because that's going to be a big thing. And obviously in Austin, that's also a big concern. Although our mass transit isn't, that abundant, with the rail and the buses, we still do have a lot of that, especially for our service providers. So we need to be mindful of that they're also going to need parking. So that will help us a little bit. All right. The best thing ever is this is the best hiring market. With people having to be laid off, it doesn't mean that they're, the worst of the bunch. It could be just, last hired, first fired type of thing. And so because of that, you want to make sure that if you do have any possible openings, start looking at them now. I can tell you that we had 5 openings during COVID where we needed some property administrators. And we went out, we put the ads out, and we had so many options, and great options. And we actually hired, I think, 6 people during quarantine. Like, they never came into our corporate office. Everything was done remotely. We sent their laptops to them at their home, and we did everything through MS Teams. That's literally how we hired our people, and they are doing a great job. And we've had most of them for at least 2.5 months now. And it's gone really well, especially college students. So if you're looking for entry-level property administrators, those college kids, they're anxious, they're hungry. So please make sure you reach out to them and hire them. Go through temp agencies. We're using BG and Office Team, both, and they're both giving us some really great prospects. So definitely look into that. And then also, if you know that there may be an opportunity for you to get another assignment, and especially in Atlanta, surprisingly, we're still getting assignments through quarantine, then there's an opportunity for you guys to get good property managers, good assistant property managers, but just understand that they may not feel comfortable working in the office. They may want to work remotely. So that's something that you definitely need to think about is, do you have the capacity to be able to work truly remotely and train remotely? That was one of the things that I do say that Stream did really well, is we started putting those technology systems into place like back in February. So come March 15th, when we all went into quarantine, we were 100% ready to go. We made sure that our internet, our VPN was up to speed, that we could literally have our entire company on our VPN at the same time. And that made a huge difference for us to be very well connected and be able to continue to communicate with our people and with our customers. Okay. Revenues, major tenants are actually still paying, surprisingly enough. I will say that it's probably only for, good paying tenants like a Google that has great credit, the Amazons of the world, and so on and so forth. Now, how long this is going to last, who knows? They might get to a point where they're just like, okay, you know what? We've been doing this for 5 or 6 months. We're not going to continue to pay because there's no one in the office. All right. So make sure you check your leases to make sure that they either have, must takes. Please, that's the way that you should be doing your leases, or on must takes nowadays. Or if they're just, they have the option to use up to a certain amount. The beauty of if they have the up to a certain amount is that you can actually, knowing that people are kind of still working remotely, you can actually upsell. So you can have a 40% oversell. I know at 515, I think we were at like 28%, like year before last, and that was great. Like we always had a few spaces. Granted, they were always at the top, but there were still spaces, so the building was never fully full. But now with people working remotely, we can even upsell, oversell even more, and start getting that transient money back in. So that's really helpful. So you definitely want to do that. And so I put 40% oversell, great deal. 40% oversell, great deal. It's that good. I had to repeat it twice. Okay. All right. Any questions on parking? All right. We're going to move on. Commercial cleaning. Let's see. I want to make sure that we are off mute because I have, I believe, a special guest that I may ask for some other information on commercial cleaning. So commercial cleaning is a big thing that we're doing right now, right? So this is from one of our local Austin vendors, and this is an enhanced sanitizing and disinfecting scope. So it's not the normal, you're going to wipe, you're going to dust every so often. This is definitely more intense. It's a more intensified, and I think that this is something that we have to look at for next year. It's not something that we can actually ignore, okay? So yes, we can say COVID's going to be gone, the vaccine is going to come at the end of the year. We don't know that for sure. And I know for sure I am not going to be the first guinea pig of that vaccine. I don't know about you, but it's not going to be me, all right? So we're going to need probably another 6 months to really test to see how effective that vaccine is and to see if COVID actually is able to go away. From what I'm hearing right now is the COVID-19 is starting to mutate, which isn't surprising because most viruses do. And so even though they're working on this virus and it's working on this vaccine and it's getting so, we're so close, as the virus starts to mutate, that vaccine is not going to be as potent, right? So those are things you have to consider. So you can't just say, okay, now, we're only going to be doing this for 2020 and then the pandemic is going to go away. You have to be responsible and think there's a strong possibility we are still going to be going through this pandemic at least till mid next year. So you need to be prepared for that. So you need to have the higher end cleaning, not just doing the basic cleaning anymore, because that's not going to be enough. Right now, I know a lot of people, we had, oh my goodness, one of our buildings had 5 cases of COVID, and they were all actually employees of tenants. And so every single time we had to pay to have the common areas cleaned. We did not bill the property, the tenant, but we obviously are going to pass it back through to all of the tenants. but the tenant was responsible for that deep cleaning. Well, unfortunately, we couldn't mandate that. So this is something that you guys really need to think about, especially as new tenants are coming in during this time, is you need to put that in their lease, that they're going to be responsible for their own people and in cleaning of their spaces. If they contract, you know, COVID-19 or any other, now we actually have to put pandemic information language into a lease. I mean, who knew that that was ever going to happen? But that's where we are at this point. So we actually have one tenant in Atlanta that I can speak of that actually has had 4 different cases of COVID and absolutely refuses to do a deep clean. What do you do with that? I can't force them. I can't mandate them. There's nothing in the lease, no lease language that says that they have to do this. So where does that leave us? So the only thing we can do, obviously, is clean the common areas and really kind of hope for the best. And because they didn't clean the first time, that's how the other 3 cases come about. You know, again, we're working remotely. We have signs on our doors that literally say, if you need service, you need to put a work order in, or you need to call or email. Like, we're not even letting people in our spaces, in our management offices right now, because it's just so dangerous and people are not being responsible. So things to look out for. So obviously we have this higher end sanitizing, scope of work that I think is very, very important. It's truly like using disinfectant spray and wiping down everything. Okay. So these are things that you really have to take into account as you're putting your budgets together. I like the idea, this particular vendor has these little table signs, you know, like the little tent signs, and they can show that it's either dirty or that it's clean. I love that. I think that is so cool. It's something that you want to do. And you also want to make sure that when you're hiring a company, especially a cleaning company, because that's so important, that you're hiring a company that's following COVID protocol. So you want to make sure that they have a health questionnaire for every day for every single employee. That's what we do at Stream. We get an email every single day saying, do you have any of these symptoms? And if you do, then you should go into work. And then on top of that, you have to get tested. And until your test comes back, you're in quarantine for 14 days. Okay. Another thing is they are checking temperatures as people are, you know, before they even get into your office, which is great to make sure that at least they don't have a fever so that they're highly contagious. So we're helping that. Masks, and they're also wearing gloves, which I think is great. I know that I've seen a lot of people wearing masks, but not so many people wearing gloves. And that's something that we also need to think about, is that we have those. And I would definitely encourage everyone to make sure that they have a stock of wipes. And if you guys can't find them, talk to your janitorial companies, because they probably have a stock full of them in a closet somewhere that they're willing to share with everybody, because they want everybody to be safe, right? And they want to bring value. So that's something we need to think about. Secondly, the electrostatic disinfection. I'm not sure if everybody's heard of this, but remember they were doing fogging initially. That's when we first started, I think back in March and April, there was a big thing about fogging. And then, so our protocol was you would fog, and then you would have to wait 24 hours, and then you would wipe everything down. And that's when you knew that the building was fully, or the space was fully disinfected. Well, now they're not doing quite that. They're not doing the fogging, but it's very similar to that. So they're doing this electrostatic spray instead. And obviously you can see some of the prices here, single treatments, biweekly treatments. These are things that are really important. So these are things that you need to take into account and at least put maybe contingency in your budgets for. Again, talk to your service providers. And if your service providers are not providing this service, then maybe you should change your service provider. So, and you know, make sure you have somebody that's reputable, that honestly understands this and is an expert at it. You know, I remember when we were going through our LEED certification, we wanted to go with a specific company because we knew that they had LEED certified people that had been trained on what needs to be LEED. If you get someone that thinks they know, it's not the same thing. And you can actually lose your certification, your LEED certification, if you're not using the proper green products, right? So if you're continuing to use disinfectant and you're not using just the regular sprays, that, you know, the green sprays, then you're putting yourself at risk of losing your certification. So that's something also you have to really look at. So I strongly encourage for everybody to do that. So let's see, hand sanitizer stands. I'm assuming everybody has hand sanitizer stands in their lobbies of, obviously, of your office building specifically. Is there anyone that does not have those at this point? Because I would be totally surprised if you didn't. Ooh. Leah, did you have a question? All right. Jasmine Porter said that they are on back order. Yes, we are having that same problem. So funny enough, Jasmine, I have been trying to order stands since beginning of March, literally the beginning of March. I have gone through Amazon. I had gone through other companies that said that they had stands, and they were just like ridiculously. Oh my goodness. Elizabeth Logan said that theirs were stolen. Oh, wow. That is horrible. I'm so sorry. That's just really bad. I do have a Dallas dealer that I'm working with. Now, I will say that when I went on Amazon, let me tell you my Amazon story because this is really interesting. 2 different times I ordered, and I was ordering over $17,000 worth of stands, and it was all a scam. Thankfully, they didn't bill our credit card, but they kept us on the hook for months. And then all of a sudden, they canceled the order. It was horrible. So finally, we were able to find a vendor in Dallas that was able to send them to us all the way to Atlanta. But of course, we ended up having to pay like $750 freight fee. It was actually absolutely crazy. So we ended up, so I think the initial price for those were, anywhere from $200 to $250. We're now up to like $340 a stand. And one of our buildings has so many different, entrances. We need 10 of those. They want them on each floor. They want them in the elevator, lobbies. It's crazy. So, people are spending a lot of money to get these things done. So if there is someone, it looks like Vito, you use a local janitorial company named ProServe. Okay, so there's ProServe. There's also, I will make sure that when we send this presentation out, and I know there's some handouts that I need to send you as well, I will send you the Dallas information as well for anybody that's interested in that. Do I have Chris Covo on?
I'm here.
Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Good.
Do you guys have any stands that you guys are selling locally?
So we, as many of you know, we made some custom, beautiful stands, and we distributed them out to a lot of. I think we sold over 500 stands across the Austin market.
Wow.
And now we're just doing those as people really want them and the orders come in. The biggest thing with hand sanitizer is that Purell is still really hard to get. We all want Purell. We want the Purell stands. We want the Purell hand sanitizer. We want their gel. And right now, you're still getting a lot of the off-brand liquid stuff, the off-brand gel. A lot of the off-brand gel stuff is just sticky. It doesn't work well. It doesn't have the correct alcohol content, so that's why it doesn't dry correctly. And so, especially when you're buying some of this off-brand hand sanitizer, make sure it's got at least 60% plus, really 70% best alcohol content. And then if that's the case, when you put it on your hand, even if it smells funky, it'll evaporate and go away. And so that's
okay.
for everyone to keep in mind. And then if you want one of the custom-made steel hand sanitizer stands, we can still get them for you. They're obviously more expensive, and we are hopeful that the Purell stands will come back to the market soon because that's really the best option for everybody.
No, totally agree. Chris, do you mind talking a little bit more about the electrostatic? Because I know that that's something that a lot of different companies are bringing up, but we just want to make sure that we're not getting duped with some other, product or some other service that's actually not as good.
Yeah, so of course. So there's a couple things that everyone should keep in mind. Number one, tenants keep using this term deep clean, and I've found myself using that too. When you're in COVID, in COVID world, we need to differentiate between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. When you're cleaning, you're actually removing dirt. You're removing dust. you're taking the dust bunny out, you're mopping. When you're sanitizing, you're taking a disinfectant, you're spraying it, and you're wiping it, removing 95 to 99% of what's there. When you're disinfecting, you're allowing whatever the EPA approved disinfectant that you're using is to dwell, which means it goes on wet, which is what the electrostatic sprayer does, in a very light mist, and then it sits and it evaporates on its own. Typically, it's going to take 10 to 15 minutes. At that point, whatever you've sprayed or treated is actually disinfected. You can make that claim with full confidence. And so there's an issue with definitions here where a tenant says, hey, I want a deep clean, and what they're really asking for is an electrostatic treatment so that their space is disinfected. And they also need to understand that that doesn't mean necessarily that the dust bunny in the corner under their desk is going to be getting clean. That's janitorial. That's different. It's a separate service. That's not to say that your janitorial provider shouldn't be doing a bang-up job and there shouldn't be dust bunnies where there. But, and so when it comes to electrostatic treatment, another thing that we've seen that is really important is that there's two things have been kind of conflated with the electrostatic is an antimicrobial treatment or coating versus just the electrostatic disinfection. Electrostatic disinfection is using that EPA approved disinfectant, spraying it, and then that doesn't last, i.e. when I spray and treat and the disinfectant has dwelled, at that point it's disinfected. As soon as someone enters the environment, it's contaminated. I cannot tell you that it's a disinfectant environment. The antimicrobial treatment is actually meant to just fight bacteria, not viruses. So the disinfectant is a viricide. The antimicrobial is a antibacterial, which means it stops bacteria from growing and fungus from growing. So those are separate. So typically we would use the antimicrobial in gym locker rooms, and it does stop from fungus to grow, but it does not stop the virus. And those are two very important things. That doesn't mean that using the antimicrobial during COVID or period is not a good thing. I think it is. And that does have the coating will last for 90 days, but that's not fighting the virus. Those are two separate things that I think has been conflated that everyone should keep in mind. And the last thing I'll say about the electrostatic treatment, and then I'll shut up, is that there's been a huge proliferation of the industrial hygienist market, and like pretty serious, like scary, you have a confirmed case, you're going to bring in like the anthrax squad and like the world's going to end. The CDC has put out guidelines that that's just not the case. You know, if you can't clean, wait a couple days. If you can clean, do it. A lot of this, honestly, is you guys managing the fear of your tenants so that they come back to work and feel safe. And so you can state by fact that if someone's wearing gloves, a shield like in this picture, and they're using electrostatic sprayer, that's all they need to be doing. And a mask, that's all they need to be doing. When you treat, it needs the disinfectant needs to dry. After that, you can go in, and it's a simple process. It's disinfected. It doesn't last. So you want to get on some sort of rotating schedule of sanitizing or disinfecting over time, and that's what that extra scope is meant for. The enhanced scope, post-COVID scope for next year to be considering, and then ensuring that people just kind of understand the reality of what's happening, and not that there's this first of all scary thing happening, but also that we're doing anything that's like life-changing. It's not life-changing. It's a fact. Disinfectant dwells. It's disinfected. Last thing I'll say, as I said I was going to say the last thing before, but the actual last thing is that as it relates to LEED, green cleaning. For instance, in the PJS green cleaning program, but typical green cleaning, you only use disinfectant and the viricides in bathrooms because that's not a green cleaning product. But we're going to keep the bathrooms sanitized. Everywhere else, you use a general purpose cleaner. So in a green cleaning system, everything else is green, so to speak. Well, right now, most major janitorial firms have adopted using disinfectant as their primary use cleaner. Over time, that's not a long-term solution. It's not a green cleaning solution. It's a pandemic solution. So everyone needs to keep that in mind, because if you're using disinfectant for long periods of time, you're actually going to allow viruses to figure out a way to fight them. And we don't want that. And I'm not a scientist. We have general knowledge about green cleaning and the things that we use, but we do know that over time that's not going to work. And so that's something that we're going to be keeping an eye on. And at some point, we're going to be probably saying, hey guys, you know, in 6 months, we're going to start reducing the amount of disinfectant that we're using in your space. And the program's going to be doing this, and we're going to move things around. And we're going to go back more to a cleaning soap and water system. And that's just, anyway, something to keep in mind as we move forward with this stuff.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. That was so helpful. You did that way better than I would have.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you were on the call. Something else to think about is there is a new certification, because you know we all need more certifications to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. There is now the WELL certification. So obviously we have the LEED and all these other things, green. Now it's WELL. So what's interesting about this one is that it's more of a holistic approach to things. And so it's, if you see, they're talking about like, obviously the air quality, the water quality, nourishment. So let's say like in Facebook or Google, they have their own kitchens and things of that nature. So they're actually going to rank you on how many healthy options that you actually have. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So this wouldn't apply to most buildings, but it would apply to buildings that have large tech companies in them where they service them kind of 24 hours a day with food and other things like that. Some of the other items on there is the light. There's like movement. You know, are you sure that you have a good path of travel and you feel like that you can move around and you're not just stuck behind a desk. Thermal comfort, obviously, sound, making sure that it's not too loud, that you maybe have that white noise. That's very helpful. That there's just not a whole lot of loud sounds that are coming in and that they're not distracting. Materials, and then just the mind and the community. So wanting to make sure that you're doing like social events, and we'll kind of talk about tenant events in a little bit, but I thought that was really interesting that they're trying to take this very holistic approach to not just manage the building, but to manage the people in the building. So it's something definitely to look at if that's something that you're into. And then if you have that type of tenant base where that could actually be very beneficial. So obviously like the Google building would be a great building. Even let's see, 300 West 6th with Facebook in it, and some other ones that have tech companies in there. I think those would be really good buildings to try this program with. It's pretty interesting. So I definitely suggest you guys look into it. And literally you can just type in WELL, I think it's well.com, and it will pop up and you'll be able to go through. It's very, very detailed. Each of those concepts has its own huge, different area that things that you need to look into and things that you have to do. But it's really, it's quite fascinating if you're really into that more holistic, people are beings and that they need all of these different things and the synergy of the work environment. So something to definitely look at. One of the things that we didn't talk about are day porters. So I know that one of the questions, many questions that we continue to have from our tenants was, are we increasing our cleaning during the day? And the answer is, it's up to your owner. I mean, we would love to say that, we have this requirement that every day porter is going to clean all of the entrances, all of the doorknobs every hour on the hour. Is that realistic? Probably not, unless you have an owner that is, just highly afraid of this COVID situation and thinks that there's that possibility of liability, which there is not. We've checked with our attorneys. We can do what we can do. Ultimately, it's up to the tenant to make the decision on what they would like to do for their particular space inside their space. But we're going to do what we can do, in the common areas and in the exteriors. So I would definitely suggest, if you have an owner that is willing to give you another day porter and all they do is wipe down, surfaces, popular surfaces, then go for it. But if you don't, then you need to be very specific, very non-specific when you're talking to your tenants and answering those questions about day porters, or the steady cleaning, because they're going to ask for the moon, the sun, and the stars. And what you're probably going to be able to provide them is earth. Okay, so that's something that you really need to think about, is what can you do to be able to provide good service, but within your budget. So one of the things that we did is we actually came up with a memo that just says that the building and the ownership are following CDC guidelines, whatever that is at that moment in time, because obviously it changes as we're getting more information on COVID and what it has to offer. So those are things that you need to really consider, is how to communicate with your tenants. So I strongly encourage you to have your legal team look at those memos that you're sending out to tenants, so that you are not promising something that you cannot deliver, or making sure, or holding an owner accountable to something that we can't deliver as well. So we need to make sure we're doing that. We have a question. Can you share the COVID-related janitorial cleaning scope slide that was on the screen? Yes, I will definitely do that. Thank you. Amy, if you can remind me to do that, I would greatly appreciate it. We'll make sure and send everything to you. So you should be able to have that. And we'll also send you that Dallas contact for the stands as well. Thank you so much for that question. So day porters is really important. One of the things that we did in regards to just kind of keeping people safe is our security console in our higher end office buildings. They all have the plexiglass shield around them. Our front desk person has the plexiglass in front of them as well. And those are really important things. And we're just trying to protect our people as much as possible. But you have to be realistic about it, right? You can't do everything for everybody, and you have to make sure that you're providing a good level of service within CDC guidelines, or up to where the ownership is willing to pay. Anything past that, you're starting to put yourself in liability. Okay, let us move on. Any more questions in regards to janitorial? Because I thought Chris did a great job. Thanks, Chris. All right, let's move on. So of course, the big question is HVAC. All right, so this is a little tricky, because as we had talked about before, it's really depending on your system. So I can give you all of these different $1 million options, but if that doesn't work for your particular system, then it's useless, right? So first and foremost, I would always say evaluate your system. You need to find an expert that can go in and really analyze what it is that your building can do. We have buildings that are really, really old. We're trying to bring all of this outside air in, and we're not able to, because it can only go up to a certain level. We've talked about upgrading our filters to MERV 13. Some we can't do that. I think Jasmine mentioned that she could only go to MERV 8. So those are things that, again, you have to look at. I know that there is also, cleaning of the ducts. There's so many different recommendations out there. You need to be really careful with those, because a lot of these people are kind of getting shysty about this and taking advantage of our fear. And that's the last thing that we want to do. So some of the things that, some of the questions that came up is, how might all of the above change to make buildings safer in a COVID-19 environment? So obviously you have better ventilation, you have good airflow that's coming in, and you also need to look at possibly changing out your filters, right? Here's a good one. Would you recommend the installation of UV air treatment systems or ionization units in existing air handler units, given that they won't increase pressure losses? Here's the issue with this. We have done so many studies across all of our portfolio in Atlanta, and I'm sure it's no different than in Austin. You have brand new buildings, and you have buildings that are 50 years old, right? Because that's where we came from, right, Jen? That's what we're dealing with. So be very careful with this whole UV system thing and the ionization. One of the vendors came out to our building and said we could put these UV beam light fixtures right at the entrance of the airflow, and it's supposed to, kill all of that bacteria and viruses as they come in. It's a load of boohooey, and it's extremely expensive. So those are things that you have to look at. When we actually priced out that ultraviolet, wave stuff that they were talking about, one of our buildings was $85,000, and that building was a little over 500,000 square feet, and it was going to cost $85,000 to put that system in, which makes absolutely no sense. And then unfortunately, if you did put that in, they're still not energy efficient, so then your energy bill is going to go up, your utility expenses are going to go up, and that's the last thing that you really want to do. And a lot of those systems just don't work, okay? We talked about MERV 13s. It's not the be-all, end-all, okay? What do we have an issue with when you start to push in MERV 13s? We had this problem when we went to LEED. Everybody put in MERV 13s. Well, we used them, especially when we were moving tenants in, to get all of the dust and all of the construction stuff out, right? And then we decided to stay with MERV 13s to meet the requirements for LEED. But what it ended up doing, it ended up having to force the systems to work so much harder to push the air through the MERV 13s that, yes, the air was cleaner. I will admit to that. But at what cost? It's going to take the building, the building system so much more to actually make a difference on those systems. So it's something that you have to think about, because if you're doing that, then that means that your maintenance fees, your maintenance expenses may also go up because of that. So you have to really weigh it out on what makes the most sense. So I definitely suggest that you go to an expert. There are tons of different HVAC companies out there that can actually help you make the best determination on what works for your building. Again, meeting CDC guidelines, but not going so overboard that you're putting the ownership in debt, because you know that's still going to be billed back to the tenant, which means your CAM's going to go up, and that's the last thing anybody wants to see. Your utilities, your utility expenses may go up because you're having to use so much power to push that airflow through. Your MERV 13, I know filters are still a little bit more expensive than the old ones, so that's another thing that you have to consider. So really what I'm saying is make sure that you are taking the time to research this and not just going to some fly-by-night company that promises the moon, the stars, and the sun, because it's just not going to happen, because everything doesn't fit for everything, okay? So really take that into strong consideration as you're going through this process, all right? All right, any questions on HVAC, or do I actually have any HVAC companies on the line that would like to share anything? I would obviously be very curious to hear if they have any additional thoughts to that. Anything? Anything? Bueller? All right, let's move on. So let's talk about tenant events. Yay! My favorite thing. So what's fun about tenant events, obviously, is you're getting everybody together. You're trying to create this community, this synergy. You have all of these people, we're creating all of this community space in our offices, in our buildings now. So you have like an amenity center. You may have like the big, the big tables and all these little stools that they can look out into the sun and, get away from their office. And it's all great. But now what? We're in the middle of a pandemic. We need everybody to be social distancing, 6 feet apart. Some people are wearing masks. Some people don't believe in wearing masks, and you're trying to work it all out. So I came up with a few things that we did while we were actually in quarantine, that we were utilizing with some of our tenants, and then also with our staff, which I thought was really, really cool. So we need to definitely do that. Thank you, Elizabeth. I love my mermaid costume as well. All right, so some ideas. Now, while I'm talking, I want you guys to think of some ideas that you have for virtual tenant events that I want you guys to share. And please feel free to unmute yourself and talk about them or put them in chat, okay? I want this to be interactive. I know I don't have all of the answers, so I want everybody to make sure that they're participating. So some of the things that we came up with was teaching a workshop of some sort. It could be any type of workshop. Interviewing an industrial influencer, maybe local or even someone that's, national or international. And a lot of these speakers are doing things for free because they're still trying to get their name out there. So this is the perfect time to get a public speaker to come out and do some specific things for you at a very discounted rate, just FYI. All right. Embrace your Martha Stewart is what I call it. So, a lot of times you see things on TikTok, you're seeing things on Instagram about all these different things that they're doing. So when I say embrace your Martha Stewart, I'm talking about have someone that one of your employees or somebody that you know that is a great cook, and literally teach a cooking class on how to make muffins, how to make overnight oatmeal, how to plant a garden, how to plant basil and get your own herb garden. Believe it or not, people love that stuff. Like they want something simple, and it doesn't take more than 15, 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes to put these things together. And you're just literally no different than Zoom, no different than MS Teams, just getting online and sharing this information. And all you're doing is you're putting the information out and you're specifying a time that they can actually go on collectively to be able to do these things. Yes, some of them would be after hours, but some of them obviously can be during business hours, and those are things that you want to look at. Allow each tenant to present their own business. If it's something that, again, it's creating that community, like we're always talking about, that synergy, bringing all of our tenants together, which is why we have tenant events. Well, this is a great way that especially our new tenants, like our newbies, our new businesses, can actually come out and they can share what they're actually doing with everybody, which I think is always a really great idea. This was a really cool idea that that my residential apartment complex did. They did puzzle hour. So what they would do is they would go out to like Oriental Trader, and they would buy these little puzzles and like little boxes of puzzles, and they would send them out to all of the residents. So you could send them out to all of the different tenants, right? So each tenant has their own little puzzle box, and you specify a certain time. And during that time, they have, let's say, 20 minutes collectively in their group or their tenant, their tenant space, to put the puzzle together. And it's basically a contest. So whoever is able to put the puzzle together first wins a prize. They could win a gift card. They could win a free, awesome parking space or something of that nature. There's so many different things that you can come up with, right? So the puzzle, I thought the puzzle idea was really great. One of the things that we did is when we were in quarantine, we had a bi-weekly yoga class. So we actually found a yoga instructor that was on Zoom, and we paid $80, and all of our employees in Atlanta were able to dial into this Zoom call, and we all did yoga together. And it was so much fun. It was even more fun to see our engineers do it because they are not flexible. It was the greatest thing, but we bonded over it, and then, we talked about it, and it was just such a great way to pull everyone together. So instead of having, your gym, obviously you can't have everybody in the gym at this point, and hopefully you can do that next year. Have a yoga class or an art class or a dance class, anything that somebody that can do even in their apartment or even in an open area. So it's something different that you guys can do. And then we had a baby picture contest. And again, this is something that you guys can do, send out to each tenant and say that they can have their own contest, or you can do as a group, especially if it's just a company, where everybody sends in a baby picture and then you have to figure out who's who. And it's super fun. It's a bonding moment, I think, for everybody. So it's something definitely to consider. Does anybody else have any suggestions on different events that they can do for their tenants? Anybody have anything else? Because I thought these were pretty friggin' awesome. Oh, one more thing. We did painting. It's the painting in a twist or whatever it's called. So they will send you easels and little paints and little brushes, and you can send those out to your tenants, and then they can also do that as well, and it can be a Zoom call. So I thought that was pretty cool. Oh, bingo! We wanted to play bingo. That was so much fun. So that would be a great opportunity for for you guys to get your tenants together and play bingo. I love that. Thank you, Becca. And then also, obviously, any type of trivia. It's a lot of fun. I like the ones that have movies because I'm a movie buff, but you can do ones that have like movie lines, famous lines from movie, things of that nature, like "I'll be back," like obviously that's the Terminator, those type of things. So it's really, really cool. Vito had a suggestion. We had some of our residents who were musicians and offered to do a live acoustic on our outside, oh my gosh, on outside media in exchange for allowing them to post their Venmo for tips. I love that. That is a great idea, Vito. That is really impressive. That would be super fun. I mean, there's so many different things that you guys can do, and you don't know who is so talented, like in your building, right? Like just put out a memo and ask who has a talent, whatever it may be, and allow them the opportunity to present that, like on a Zoom call or something like that. I think that would be super duper fun. Great. I really like the musician thing though. That's very, very cool. And I love bingo. There's like electronic bingo. I've got to look into that one. So I'm super excited. Thank you, Becca. All right, so let us move on to something that one of our participants had asked about is virtual tours. So I think this is something that some of us are going to. Not every broker is comfortable with doing this. I don't know if it works for everybody, but I know in Atlanta, we've actually started doing that because we were in quarantine for like 2 or 3 months, and we still needed to show space, and we weren't comfortable going out, even with mask on, even with gloves, even with all the PPE. So what we did is we actually bought a drone for all of our industrial properties, which really helped us. I think that drone cost us about $550. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them almost anywhere. And it's a great investment. You can even fly it through your office buildings or whatever, retail spots, and take pictures and video. And then you can actually manipulate those videos. So it is a great way to make sure that your space is still being shown without putting people at risk. Is this something that may go, that's going to be going on for 2021? I think so. I really do. I think that there is a good chance, obviously, in person is always better, but I think just across the board that this will be another tool. It won't be the be all end all tool, but it would be an additional tool for brokers to use to make sure that they're showing their space. So I think it could be actually very, very cool. Obviously, you can also do the VR glasses. I know that we had done that at 515. We did that for some of our space that was empty, and we wanted them to see what it could possibly look like. And it was really, really cool. Again, very inexpensive. Yes, it can be expensive, and there are companies that do it. But I mean, I looked online and found, different types of software where you can actually do it yourself. So if you have somebody that's kind of, creative or tech savvy, basically get in a millennial because they know I would just give them my phone and go fix it. And they know how to do all that stuff because they've been doing it since they were 2. They'll figure it out. Like, it's amazing. Also, I realized that you can actually rent those VR glasses. So that's not something, if you don't want to have the full investment of purchasing it, you can also rent it. And then also just use your phone. That was something that we're actually doing on one of our projects. It's a co-working space, and the leasing broker feels comfortable going to the space, but of course the building is still empty. And so what he's doing is literally just taking videos, and then we're putting it on the website for people to see. And so we have different size suites that we'll put out, and so they can at least see what it's going to look like. And it's really, again, an inexpensive way of doing things that allows for that somewhat personal touch without there being that personal contact. So I think that's really important. So I think that's something that you guys really want to look at. And obviously, in talking about leasing in general, what's leasing going to look like for next year? It's a hit or miss, right? I mean, we kind of go into a recession and things start to pick up, and then they have to close the cities and the states again. We just don't know what's going to happen, unfortunately. So we have to be as proactive as possible. I've been thinking these things through on what we can do to make sure that we're getting our stuff seen, but also be extremely responsible in making sure that we're not overvaluing our properties or over-promising something to our owners that we may not be able to live up to. So it's better to be slightly conservative. I would definitely encourage all property managers that they talk to their brokers as those lease assumptions come in to make sure that they're thinking about those things as well. Because we think of it from a property management standpoint, but maybe they're not seeing it that way. And we have, our ear to the ground, our security officers, our janitorial people, they hear everything, right? So utilize those resources. I know if I ever wanted to know what was going on with a tenant, I just went to ask my security officer, and he already knew everything, plus who was dating who. It was way too much information, but it was also still very helpful. So definitely utilize those resources to find out what is actually going on so that you can properly budget for next year. So, are you budgeting for cookies? I don't know if I would be budgeting for cookies, but are you budgeting for, VR glasses? Maybe you should do that. Definitely, I would really say a drone would be great because, again, you can take it almost anywhere in a building and at least show all of the amenities to the building, which I think is really cool. And a lot of people still just aren't comfortable actually stepping outside of the office, and we don't know when that's going to change, especially for those that may be high risk. So we have to think about those things. Any questions on virtual tours? All right, we're coming down to the wire. We only got like 20 minutes left. Whoop, whoop. I'm killing it right now. Yes. All right. So how do we budget? That is the question of the day, right? So first of all, where do we get good numbers? All right. So it's important that you have great relationships with your vendors. Obviously, I had a great relationship with Chris Covo at PJS. I have great relationships with parking vendors that I really rely on to give me detailed information based on their knowledge. I'm not going to pretend to be the end all be all of everything, right? That's what we have our vendors for. They are the experts. We are just a jack of multiple things and a master of none, right? But that's what we have our service providers for. They're the ones that will provide that information to us that we can then utilize for other things. So make sure that you're utilizing your vendors. They can literally be your best friend. And they can also help you find jobs because they know what's going on in every building. Note to self, just so you know, if you're wanting to change buildings, ask a vendor, they're gonna know. So some of the great resources, some of the things that we need to think about, ensuring that all your binders are basing your estimates on the same information. So that's really one of those things of, comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. We have had that situation happen before. I think I told a story the last time I taught an entry-level budgeting class where we were putting in some equipment on the roof and we got two different quotes. Well, it turned out that the one quote that was really low was because they had existing equipment that we could use that they didn't use on another project. What was unfortunate about that is that that wasn't enough. So when we actually sent the information to the owner and saying, hey, this is how much this deal is going to cost, we didn't take into account all of the additional equipment that we were going to need. And so we unfortunately had to, go with our tails between our legs and ask the owner actually for more money. And that's something you never want to do. It's extremely embarrassing. So you want to try to avoid that at all costs. Make sure you are comparing apples to apples. Create an RFP. Have one of the vendors that you typically use create the RFP for you. Make sure that everything is line itemed out so it's all fair and equal. And then make sure that you are having the same conversation with all of the providers, not just the ones that you really like, and then you're only giving partial information to other people. It's not fair and it's not right. It's definitely not ethical, and that's something we always wanted to do, okay? So always think about that. Let's see here. I love this. You can be fast, cheap, and good, but you have to choose two of the above. You can't have everything, okay? It's either going to be fast, but it's probably not going to be good, or it's going to be cheap or fast, but it's not going to be great. So those are things that you really have to consider. So as we were talking about, make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. We do not want to compare apples to oranges because it just does not make sense. One of the things I think that are really great is we have all of these amazing resources. So we have IREM and they have a program, and BOMA has another program that will actually give you very dependable numbers that you can actually utilize for your budgets. And these are industry publications and professional organizations. So let's talk about the IREM one first. So we have the IREM income and expense analysis. And this is a report that obviously IREM puts together, and they send out basically the same thing that we do with BOMA Experience Exchange report, where we're asking for information on your actuals for the prior year, right? So you'll typically get it, I guess, February. It's usually due by, April. Sometimes it's extended to the end of the month of April to try to get all that information in, and then we try to disseminate that to everyone. So what's really cool about this is that IREM established this survey back in 1955. And obviously we started on the residential side, but I thought that was really cool that we were able to do that. And then 1982, office buildings started to be studied, and we started to incorporate that information. And then shopping centers, because in IREM, we do all of the different service lines, retail, industrial, office, all of it, and residential. So it's really important to remember that if you're looking for a lot of information on different types of streamlines, then IREM might be a really good place for you to go to get that information. And they were published annually. It's been published annually for 65 years. Now, what's interesting is that BOMA, they've been around since 1920. So they're publishing has been around for about 100 years now, which is really, really impressive. Now, BOMA typically only does office and industrial, but again, the information is still valuable. And what's nice about this is obviously BOMA and IRM work very well together as a team. And so they actually, you can send in your IRM information to BOMA and you can send your BOMA information to IRM, and it's really almost identical information. IRM is just going to be able to give you, information on retail and residential that you're not going to get through the BOMA Experience Exchange report. Okay, so let's look at some numbers here. Oh, we have a question. Oh no, they did. I just got notice Frank Reynolds said that they canceled the 2019 IE report. I'm so sorry. It's been crazy. So I definitely get that. Can somebody answer if BOMA has canceled theirs or if they're still doing their 2019 report? That would be very helpful to know. Anyone?
As far as I know, they still are.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. I knew if anybody would know, you would know. Great resource, people. Amy Ables. Woohoo! All right. So let's talk about benchmarking examples. So we have your building. Your cleaning costs are 97 cents. Your utilities are like $1.85, which is outrageous, but that's just the way things are now. And then you have security that's 46 cents. And so you have a total of $3.28. Well, you can use your EER or your IRM, and you can compare that and make sure that they're all in line. So through the EER, you're looking at the cleaning is $1.07, reasonable, utilities are $1.73, and security is 52 cents. Those are pretty standard. Now, if you had your building, let's say your cleaning was $1.50, and EER, the report is saying it's $1.07, we obviously, again, we have a problem, right? So you need to go back and reevaluate those. So it's so important to utilize these resources to really just double check your numbers and make sure you guys are on the right track, and that everything is kind of, again, comparing apples to apples. Okay, let's see. I think we had another chat somewhere in there. Uh-oh, I don't know where it went. Amy, can you read the chat that was on there, please? Oh, there it is.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I found it.
Okay.
I'm curious if they will do it for 2020 because all of them. Yeah, that's a good question, Kaylee. It's something that we'll need to ask. I can reach out. Jen, can you reach out to IRM National and see if that's something that they're looking at for 2020, please? That would be great. Thank you. All right, let us move on. All right. So value and shortcomings of the benchmarking process. The purpose obviously is to gauge and measure. If you can do it, then I can do it, right? And similar is not the same. And those are things that you really have to make sure that you're looking into as you're going through this process. So make sure, again, that you're comparing apples to apples. Documenting qualified amounts with resource identification and references will add both power and persuasion to your final budget. This is absolutely key. And this is something that I think, especially for our newbies, is something that we don't always do. Uh-oh. Okay, you don't see the presentation anymore. I'm sorry, Kaylee. Thank you. Hold, please. Let's see what we have here. Let's see. What did I do? You know, I'm always doing something I'm not supposed to be doing here. Let's see. Can you see it now? Awesome. Okay, great. I did too much clicking. I apologize. It's just me and my clicky click. So one of the things that you always want to think about, and I know like all of my experienced managers know this, but things that you want to make sure your APM and your PA know, or your tenant service coordinator, is that they need to have that documentation, right? I'm a big proponent of taking pictures, especially if you have like surface lots, if you have suburban property where you've got alligatoring and things of that nature, and you need to repave something. Don't just tell them that it needs to be done. Take pictures. That's something you should be doing during your property inspections, right? You should have your engineers go out there. You guys should be going out there. Every person should be touching that property or looking at that property at least once a month to see what's out there that needs to be changed. And as you see it, take a picture and use that for when you're actually doing your budgets. It's the best way to get things done. I absolutely love it and a huge supporter of that. So moving on, let's see here. All right, what else do we have? Provide method of how you're calculating things is very, very important as well. Don't make just open-ended assumptions because you will always get yourself in trouble. Make sure you organize your backup. I've actually heard a manager say when they were talking to an owner, well, that's because my boss told me to put that in. You do not ever say that. You better make sure you have backup to support why you put something in a budget, right? I mean, that just kind of makes sense, but you'd be surprised. And make sure that you kind of keep a binder. This is what I do, is keep a binder of all of the notes, all of the proposals, and any information that you're getting from the owner on what they wanted, so that you can actually go back and refer back to that. And surprisingly enough, a lot of managers don't do that, but it's so, so important. We already talked about photos, arranging, when you're doing a presentation that you're presenting to an owner, make sure you have all of your information like in order so that it's easy to track. One of the things that we did at Endeavor, so I'm giving out trade secrets, sorry Endeavor, but this is a really good idea, is if we were all in the same, we were all downtown office buildings, we all sat together and we all would go through our budget. And if there was anything that was similar amongst the budgets, like cleaning cost or security, then we would be able to compare to make sure we were all on the same page. And I thought that was a really great idea. Yes, it can be very time consuming because we're sitting there for like hours on end, especially if you have more than like 2 or 3 buildings. But what we found is it was a great way for us to compare and analyze where our numbers were, so that going forward we were all on the same page, and fair and equal. So I think that's something that is very, very important. All right, Houston, we have a problem. All right, on some of the common budget problems that we have, inattention to detail, typos, bad grammar, bad math, horrible. You don't have all of the information that you need to present to the ownership, or you don't have the backup to support it. That's probably one of the worst, that you don't have pictures, that you're not able to truly be able to support why you're wanting something. One of the things that I would always do is I would always have my chief engineer in the room with me, because he's going to be able to better explain any of the HVAC systems than I can. I don't pretend to know all of those things. That is his expertise. I stay in my lane, and I need for him to be the expert in all the things that he knows about the building. So obviously I need to be familiar with it, but I think it's always important. In every company I've ever worked for, in every building I've ever worked on, I've always had my chief engineer in the room with me when I did a budget review with the owner. Because sometimes, and a lot of times, they will take the word of the chief engineer, because that is their expertise, over that of a property manager that can't fully speak the lingo. So you really have to think about that, okay? Make sure that your goals are realistic in what you're trying to achieve. Don't just throw numbers in there for the sake of throwing numbers. That's always really bad. David had a comment. This is a good time to bid out contract services, as several services are changing, and it might be time to consolidate services buildings to try and get discounts. That is very true. I know that there are a couple of different companies out there that are doing that for refuge. They're doing that for HVAC. I know PJS has done that in the past. If we get a whole group of buildings together, then you get a discount. Parking is good for that as well. So make sure you're reaching out to your tenants, to your vendors, to start getting those pricing. One of the things that I always say is you should start pricing like in January, February, because everybody else is going to wait until May and June. So you should already be getting quotes for next year. Like, you should have already been doing that. As far as I'm concerned, we're already in late July. You're already behind the curve. Even if your budget's due in October, you're behind. So make sure you get those things done. Okay. Do not pad your numbers. There are budgets out there that they do not want to see contingency. They want to see real numbers. You have to be able to make sure that you are able to support the numbers that you're putting into a budget. That is actually absolutely critical. Because if you just start putting fluff in, then they just won't take you seriously, and they stop believing the information that you're giving them. And that's the worst thing that you can do, is have your owner to lose trust in you. So here are some helpful tips. Approach large projects by addressing their lesser included elements separately. So just, take little bites of it, right? There's no substitute for homework. You've got to do your homework. Use worksheets because they're more efficient and accurate, and it continues to make you organized. Make sure that you have all the proper backup, and also redo the math to make sure it's correct. Have somebody else look at it. And the biggest thing, what I actually do is I kind of do like a little rehearsal of what I'm going to say in the presentation to the owner, which I think is really fun. So, and use the budget as your most important management tool. Obviously, that's going to be huge for next year and trying to figure out what everything is going to look like. So I strongly encourage everyone to take the time to not rush through your budgets. Take it line item by line item. Don't try to do all of it in a day. Slow down. That's really, really important. And always have your documentation. That is absolutely critical to putting together a really good budget. All right. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions? I'm sure they will come up. Unless I just did a fabuloso job, which I'm sure I left something out. All right, so thank you, everybody, for everything, for listening. I think there is an announcement that someone needs to make about IREM Austin.
Oh, I think that was from last week. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, this is good. I'm sure. Jen, are you still on the phone? She may be muted. Let me see if she's on the phone. Yes, they're doing a food drive, as you can see by the slide on the screen. And so highly encourage folks to participate in that food drive. You can find more information at the IREM website. It's always a good time of the year right now. There are more people out there that need food than you might imagine. The lines are very long at the Capital Central Texas Food Bank. So please participate in the food drive. If you're a BOMA member or an IREM member, it's all for a good cause. So we encourage everyone to participate. And for those of you who are getting continuing education today, I did pop a survey link into the chat room, and I'm going to put it in there one more time just so that it pops up right now. Please fill out that survey, and or that it's not really a survey for comments. It's only for those who need to get continuing education, the 1 hour from TREC. But that's for my announcements. If you need continuing education, just grab that link from the chat room. Madeline Powers does have one more question for you, Kim, and then I am done. Thank y'all for participating.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate it. One thing in regards to the food bank, we've done this a couple different times with different organizations and just with our buildings. A $5 donation actually can feed a whole family. So as opposed to just giving them cans and things of that nature, the virtual being able to actually donate the money is actually more effective for the food bank across the board. So please make sure $5 goes a long way. It literally can feed a family of 4. So make sure that you take that into consideration and cash app them or whatever way that they need that, because it's so important right now. There are so many children because they weren't going to school that literally do not get meals because they're not getting them from the school. So the food bank is very, very important to supplement the food that they're not getting from school. And at this rate, I'm not sure what Austin is doing, but I know in Atlanta alone, we're starting out virtually. So a lot of these kids, and especially in low income housing areas, won't get the normal breakfast and lunch that they would typically get. So it's so important to make sure that you take that into consideration and give a little bit. Like, I know everybody has $10 that they can give that you can sacrifice like 2 Starbucks, Frappuccinos for, right? So please make sure and do that. And then let me go back to Madeline's question. Do you have any examples of certain items you added to your budget this year that you have not before? And also, how did you change your projections for utilities with lower occupancy? Ooh, that's a great question, Madeline. You're really going to have to, I think what's important for us, and obviously I'm not doing budgets myself, but my people are, and what we're telling them is to base your utilities off of the 2018 occupancy numbers and take that into account. Yes, there may be some occupancy, and I would probably maybe lower it by probably no more than 25%. If you are able to calculate what your utilities are, I mean, if you have that calculation, and some buildings do, some buildings don't, then you can typically, if you have kind of a baseline occupancy number, you can use that to calculate what your utilities should be. And as far as additional items that we are budgeting for next year, let me think. I haven't seen a lot of my manager's budgets just yet, so I'm trying to remember. Does anybody else have any one of you seen any other items? Oh, this is a good information. Tricia says, go to Austin Energy Load Profiler to look at my utility use now versus past. That is a great idea. Thank you, Tricia. Appreciate that. But I would definitely suggest think about cleaning is going to be probably one of the main ones, and also think about HVAC outside of utilities. Those are the three things that you're going to really, that COVID can definitely impact, right? Either you're going to need more detailed cleaning, like Chris was talking about with the electrostatic cleaning. You may need an additional day porter to keep common areas clean. You may need to add different types of filters for your HVAC units. You also may, if you do decide to go to MERV 13s, your utility rates may be going up, but that means that your systems are going to be used a lot harder. So you need to get with your engineers or your service providers to find out what equipment may be affected by that. Okay, sound good? Let's see, anybody else have any questions? No? All right. Thank you guys so much. I can honestly say, without trying to like fully blown cry, I miss all of my Austin family. I miss you guys so much. And I really appreciate IRM and BOMA Austin reaching out to me to be able to share a little bit of my knowledge and a lot of my enthusiasm with all of you, and just kind of feel reconnected. So thank you so much. So much for having me out. And if there's anything else that you guys think that you may need, I am here for you. For future reference, I am looking at doing a seminar on conflict resolution for property, for managers and employees, and some best tips on just property management as a whole, kind of property management 101. So if you guys are interested, reach out to IRM and BOMA, and maybe they'll have me come back later this year or sometime next year. I would really appreciate that. And again, I miss you guys. And as soon as COVID is a little bit more under control, I will be back and would love to see all of you guys. We'll have to get together and do like a really big lunch or something. So take care. Love you all. Don't forget to donate to the Capital Food Bank. $5 makes a big difference. $10 makes a better difference. All right. Love you guys. Take care.
Thank you, Kim. You're awesome.
Thank you.
I learned a
Bye.
ton.